Since the dawn of human consciousness, light and shadow have captured the imaginations of mystics, philosophers, and seekers of truth. These two forces, though often perceived as opposites, are deeply intertwined in the spiritual journey. Light is frequently seen as a symbol of clarity, purity, divine knowledge, and enlightenment, while shadow represents mystery, the unknown, and often the hidden aspects of the self. Yet, in many mystical traditions, both are necessary. The relationship between light and darkness is not one of conflict, but rather of balance, a dynamic interplay that shapes the path of spiritual awakening. In many ancient traditions, light and darkness are used to express duality, the polarity of existence that defines much of our physical and spiritual world. But duality does not imply division. Instead, it suggests a harmony that lies at the heart of the universe. Light cannot exist without shadow, just as shadow cannot exist without light. This concept is essential in mysticism, where the spiritual seeker must embrace both forces to experience the fullness of truth. Let's start by exploring the role of light in mysticism. Across many cultures and religious traditions, light is often viewed as the ultimate symbol of the divine. It represents the creative power of the universe, the source from which all life originates, and the illumination that brings clarity and wisdom. In many mystical texts, light is the presence of God or the Absolute, radiating through all things. For example, in Christianity, Jesus is referred to as the light of the world, a beacon of divine love and truth guiding humanity through the darkness of ignorance and sin. Similarly, in Islamic mysticism or Sufism, light is central to the concept of divine presence. The famous Persian mystic Jalal ad-Din Rumi often wrote about the metaphorical significance of light. For Rumi, light was the essence of God's love, permeating the universe and illuminating the path for those who seek truth. In one of his most well-known poems he writes, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." This idea captures the essence of mystical illumination, that light enters not just in moments of joy or clarity, but also in the depths of struggle, pain, and suffering. Light is a guide, but it also transforms the seeker from within. In the Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah, light also plays a crucial role. The concept of Ein Sof, the infinite divine source, is often described as a limitless light. According to Kabbalistic teachings, the creation of the universe was initiated by a process known as the contraction, or tzimtzum, where the divine light withdrew to make space for creation. This act allowed for the existence of both light and darkness, setting the stage for the interplay between the two forces in the spiritual journey. The Kabbalist seeks to reunite with the divine light through Tikkun Olam, the practice of repairing the world, which metaphorically involves gathering and restoring the sparks of light scattered throughout creation. However, light alone does not represent the entirety of the spiritual experience. While light illuminates, shadow reveals. It is in the darkness that the mysteries of the self, the universe, and the divine are often encountered. Many mystical traditions recognize that one cannot reach spiritual maturity by solely seeking the light. The shadow, often feared or misunderstood, holds profound wisdom. It is in shadow where one confronts the aspects of the self that are hidden, suppressed, or rejected. These parts of the self must be integrated for true spiritual growth. In Carl Jung's exploration of psychology and spirituality, he developed the concept of the shadow, to describe the unconscious aspects of the self that are often denied or ignored. He believed that the process of individuation, the journey towards becoming a whole and complete person, requires one to confront and integrate the shadow. Jung's ideas resonate deeply with mystical traditions, where shadow work is seen as an essential part of the spiritual path. To know the light, one must also know the darkness within. In the Eastern tradition of Taoism, the yin-yang symbol perfectly encapsulates this balance between light and shadow. The black and white swirling figures are not opposites in conflict, but rather complementary forces that flow into and out of each other. Yin, the dark aspect, represents the receptive, mysterious, and nurturing qualities of existence. Yang, the light aspect, embodies the active, creative, and illuminating forces. Together they create harmony. In Taoism, the goal is not to reject one in favor of the other, but to recognize the necessity of both for balance in life and spiritual understanding. Hinduism and Buddhism, too, offer rich teachings on the role of light and shadow in spiritual development. In the Bhagavad Gita, the ancient Hindu text, Krishna speaks to Arjuna about the importance of overcoming ignorance, symbolized by darkness, and attaining knowledge, symbolized by light. Yet this does not imply that darkness is evil or something to be eradicated. Instead, it is through understanding the nature of darkness, the limitations of human perception, that one can transcend duality and realize the true unified nature of reality. Buddhism takes a slightly different approach but maintains a similar understanding of light and shadow. In Buddhist thought, ignorance is often compared to darkness, while enlightenment is associated with light. However, enlightenment does not mean the complete eradication of darkness but rather the realization that both light and darkness are illusory, constructs of the mind that arise from the dualistic nature of human perception. The enlightened being recognizes the emptiness at the heart of all things, the space where light and shadow merge into one. It is here, in the space between light and shadow, that the mystical journey unfolds. The mystic is not one who flees from the darkness or clings to the light, but one who walks the path between the two, embracing both as necessary elements of the spiritual quest. In this way, the interplay of light and shadow becomes a metaphor for the inner journey of transformation. In alchemical traditions, light and shadow play a vital role in the process of spiritual transformation. Alchemy, often seen as a precursor to modern chemistry, was deeply intertwined with mystical thought, particularly in the quest for spiritual enlightenment. The alchemical process was not just about turning base metals into gold but also about transforming the self, purifying the soul by merging the forces of light and darkness within. The alchemists spoke of the nigredo, the blackening or dark phase, as an essential part of this transformation. It represented the death of the old self, the descent into shadow before the emergence of the albedo, the whitening or enlightenment phase, and finally the rubedo, the final stage of spiritual wholeness and unity. Thus, in mysticism, shadow is not the enemy of light. It is the complement, the counterbalance, the hidden teacher. Light illuminates the path, but shadow reveals the depth. Together they guide the seeker toward the ultimate truth, the unity of all things. While light is often associated with clarity, enlightenment, and the divine, darkness holds its own unique power. Darkness in mysticism is often a metaphor for the unknown, the subconscious, the mystery of existence, and the fertile ground for inner growth. It represents the aspects of life and spirituality that are not immediately visible or understandable. Just as a seed must be planted in the darkness of the soil to grow, the soul must often descend into its own depths to ascend toward enlightenment. In many mystical traditions, the descent into darkness is seen as a necessary stage in the spiritual journey. This experience, often referred to as the dark night of the soul, is a period of profound inner struggle, confusion, and sometimes even despair. Yet this phase is not a punishment, nor is it a sign of failure. Instead, it is a vital part of the transformative process. The dark night of the soul strips away the superficial layers of the ego, allowing the seeker to confront their deepest fears, doubts, and attachments. Through this confrontation, a new understanding emerges, one that cannot be attained by simply basking in the light of knowledge. Saint John of the Cross, a 16th-century Spanish mystic, is most famous for articulating the concept of the dark night of the soul in his poetry and writings. For Saint John, this dark night was not a period of divine abandonment but rather a phase where the soul is purged of its imperfections, preparing it for union with God. He described it as a time when the individual is deprived of the comforting sense of God's presence, forcing the seeker to confront their own inner darkness. However, this period of desolation is not without purpose. It serves as a refining fire that burns away impurities, leading to a deeper, more intimate relationship with the divine. In the Christian mystical tradition, the dark night of the soul is often accompanied by a profound sense of isolation and inner desolation. But paradoxically, this spiritual darkness is also the beginning of a deeper illumination. In the writings of mystics like Saint Teresa of Avila and Meister Eckhart, darkness becomes the fertile ground for spiritual renewal. It is within the dark night that the mystic is led to an encounter with the divine that transcends words, concepts, and even the senses. The journey through darkness leads to a state of union, where the seeker experiences a profound oneness with the divine source. Moving beyond Christianity, we find similar themes in other mystical traditions. In the Sufi tradition of Islam, for example, the metaphor of darkness is often used to describe the soul's journey toward God. Sufi mystics speak of a veil of darkness that separates the individual from the divine. This veil is not something to be feared but something to be pierced through by the seeker's yearning and devotion. The darkness, in this context, represents the layers of the ego, the false self, and the distractions of the material world that obscure the radiant light of God. The spiritual journey is thus one of penetrating through these layers of darkness to reach the divine presence that lies beyond. The Sufi mystic Rumi wrote extensively about this journey through darkness in his poetry. For Rumi, the darkness was not something to be avoided but embraced. He understood that it is in the darkest moments of life that the soul is prepared to receive the greatest light. In one of his famous verses he writes, Don't turn away. Keep your gaze on the bandaged place. That's where the light enters you. Here, Rumi suggests that the wounds and struggles we experience in life, those places of deep pain and confusion, are the very places where the light of divine love can enter and heal us. The darkness, then, is not a sign of failure but a necessary part of the healing process. In Hinduism, darkness plays a similarly transformative role. The goddess Kali, for example, is a powerful symbol of the divine feminine who embodies both creation and destruction. Often depicted in terrifying form with dark skin, wild hair, and a necklace of skulls, Kali represents the destructive force of time, the inevitability of death, and the dissolution of the ego. Yet she is not evil. Rather, Kali's destruction is seen as a form of compassion, a necessary clearing away of illusions and attachments so that new life can emerge. Her darkness is the dark of the womb, the place of gestation and renewal. In the Hindu epic, the Bhagavad Gita, the battle between light and darkness is also a central theme. The Gita teaches that darkness, in the form of ignorance or avidya, must be overcome for the soul to achieve liberation. Yet, this ignorance is not defeated by rejecting the world or by trying to escape the darkness. Instead, the Gita advocates for self-realization through disciplined action and detachment from the fruits of one's labor. This path requires confronting the darkness within, our attachments, fears and desires, so that the true light of the self or Atman can be realized. Buddhist teachings similarly address the role of darkness in the spiritual path, though from a somewhat different perspective. In Buddhism, darkness often symbolizes ignorance, or the lack of understanding of the true nature of reality. However, this ignorance is not seen as something inherently evil but as a misunderstanding that can be corrected through wisdom and mindfulness. The Buddha taught that suffering, which is often compared to a state of darkness, arises from our attachments and our failure to see the impermanent and interconnected nature of all things. By cultivating mindfulness and insight, the practitioner can dispel the darkness of ignorance and awaken to the true nature of reality, which is beyond the dualities of light and darkness. In Tibetan Buddhism, the concept of bardo, or the intermediate state between death and rebirth, is often described in terms of light and darkness. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that after death, the soul passes through various stages of consciousness, encountering both blinding lights and terrifying darkness. These experiences are said to be projections of the mind, reflecting the individual's karmic accumulations. The goal for the practitioner is to recognize these experiences for what they are, temporary illusions, and to remain centered in the awareness of the luminous nature of the mind itself. In this way, the darkness of death becomes an opportunity for enlightenment, as it reveals the true nature of the mind and the illusory nature of all dualities. We also see the significance of darkness in the shamanic traditions of indigenous cultures. For shamans, the darkness is often associated with the spiritual underworld, a realm of mystery and transformation. In many shamanic practices, the healer or practitioner enters a state of altered consciousness to journey into the underworld. This journey is often undertaken in darkness, both literal and metaphorical, as the shaman descends into the hidden realms of the psyche to retrieve lost parts of the soul, heal trauma, or gain wisdom from spiritual guides. The darkness, in this context, is not something to be feared but a place of power and potential. In many Native American traditions, the night and the darkness it brings are revered as times of deep spiritual connection. Ceremonies held in darkness, such as sweat lodges or vision quests, are designed to strip away the distractions of the outer world and allow the participant to confront their inner self. In the silence and stillness of the dark, profound insights and healing can emerge. The darkness becomes a space of incubation, where the seeds of transformation are sown. The concept of darkness as a transformative force also finds expression in Western esoteric traditions, such as Hermeticism and alchemy. In alchemy, the process of spiritual transformation is often described in terms of color stages, with a nigredo or blackening phase representing the first stage of dissolution and purification. This phase is characterized by a descent into chaos, where the old self is broken down, and all previous structures are dissolved. Yet, this darkness is not the end of the process but the beginning. It is a necessary phase in which the alchemist confronts their inner darkness, allowing for the eventual emergence of the albedo, or whitening phase, where the light of enlightenment begins to dawn. The mystical path, then, is not a linear journey from darkness to light. Instead, it is a cyclical process, where the seeker must continuously move through phases of light and shadow, clarity and confusion, certainty and doubt. Both light and darkness are essential for growth, and it is through their interplay that the soul is refined and transformed. Mystics understand that the deepest truths cannot be grasped by clinging to the light alone. Instead, they emerge from the dance between light and shadow, as the seeker learns to embrace both with humility, courage, and an open heart. As we move into the final phase of our exploration, it is important to acknowledge that the relationship between light and shadow in mysticism is not just about personal transformation, but also about the cosmic and collective dimensions of existence. Light and shadow do not merely symbolize the inner workings of the soul, they are also seen as forces that shape the entire cosmos, the spiritual realms, and even the dynamics of human society. In many mystical traditions, the balance between light and shadow is seen as a reflection of cosmic order. This balance is often understood as part of the divine will or the inherent structure of the universe. For example, in Zoroastrianism, one of the oldest monotheistic religions, there is a clear dualism between the forces of light and darkness. Ahura Mazda, the god of light, represents truth, order, and life, while Ingra Mainyu, the spirit of darkness, embodies falsehood, chaos, and death. However, even in this dualistic framework, the ultimate goal is not the eradication of darkness, but its eventual reconciliation and transformation. Zoroastrian eschatology teaches that in the end times, the forces of light will prevail, and even the forces of darkness will be purified and redeemed. This theme of cosmic reconciliation between light and shadow can also be found in Kabbalistic thought. In Kabbalah, the concept of Sitra Achra, the other side, represents the darker aspects of creation, forces that seem to oppose the divine light. Yet, Kabbalistic teachings emphasize that even the other side has a role in the divine plan. The task of the Kabbalist is not to destroy the forces of darkness, but to elevate and transform them, reuniting them with their divine source. The process of tikkun, the restoration or repair of the world, requires the integration of both light and shadow. In this way, darkness becomes a tool for revealing hidden aspects of the divine, a necessary counterbalance that helps bring the universe into its destined harmony. This cosmic understanding of light and shadow is also prevalent in Eastern traditions. In Hinduism, the concept of Lila, the divine play, describes the entire universe as a manifestation of the divine, where both light and darkness, creation and destruction, are expressions of the same cosmic energy. In this sense, darkness is not something to be feared or avoided, but part of the dynamic process of existence. The cycles of creation and destruction, light and shadow, are part of the eternal dance of Shiva Natraja, the cosmic dancer who embodies the rhythm of the universe. His dance encompasses both the creation of the world and its eventual dissolution, symbolizing that both light and darkness are necessary aspects of the divine play. In Buddhism, the cosmic dimension of light and shadow is reflected in the teachings on samsara and nirvana. Samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, is often described in terms of darkness, an endless cycle of suffering rooted in ignorance. Yet, within the heart of samsara lies the potential for nirvana, the state of enlightenment that transcends dualities, including those of light and darkness. In Mahayana Buddhism, the bodhisattva is one who willingly remains within samsara, choosing to work within the darkness of the world to help others awaken. This act of compassionate descent into darkness is seen as a form of spiritual heroism, as the bodhisattva shines the light of wisdom and compassion into the world, even while navigating its shadows. These cosmic interpretations of light and shadow lead us to the idea that the balance between these two forces is not simply an individual or internal matter, but one that reflects the larger dynamics of human society and the world at large. Mystical traditions often recognize that the darkness we encounter in the world, war, injustice, oppression, and suffering, is not separate from the darkness we confront within ourselves. Just as the individual must integrate their own shadow, so too must humanity confront the collective shadow that exists in our institutions, cultures, and societies. In modern psychology, this idea is echoed in the work of Carl Jung, who suggested that the collective shadow consists of the unconscious aspects of a society that are repressed or ignored. These shadow elements often manifest as social injustices, prejudices, and destructive behaviors that, when left unchecked, can lead to immense suffering on a global scale. Jung argued that only by bringing these shadow elements into the light of conscious awareness can a society hope to achieve true healing and balance. This notion of the collective shadow has profound implications for how we engage with the world as spiritual seekers. Mysticism is not just about personal enlightenment, it is also about social responsibility. In many mystical traditions, the goal is not to escape the world or to transcend its suffering, but to engage with it in a meaningful way, to bring the light of consciousness and compassion into the darkest corners of existence. This is often referred to as the path of the spiritual warrior, one who walks the line between light and shadow, confronting darkness not with fear or avoidance, but with the intention of transformation and healing. In contemporary spirituality, the balance between light and shadow has taken on new relevance, particularly in the context of environmental and social justice movements. The ecological crises facing our planet can be seen as a manifestation of humanity's collective shadow, the consequences of our disconnection from nature, our overconsumption, and our failure to live in harmony with the earth. Similarly, the struggles for racial, economic, and gender equality reflect the need to confront the darkness of systemic oppression, prejudice, and inequality. Many spiritual activists and mystics today are calling for a deeper integration of light and shadow in our approach to these global challenges. They recognize that simply focusing on the light aspects of spirituality, such as love, peace, and unity, without addressing the shadow aspects, such as power, injustice, and suffering, leads to a kind of spiritual bypassing, where the deeper issues are ignored or suppressed. Instead, they advocate for a spirituality that embraces the full spectrum of human experience, one that acknowledges the pain and darkness in the world while also working to bring about healing and transformation. The mystical path, then, is one of constant balancing, between light and shadow, between personal and collective, between the inner and outer realms. It is a path that requires courage, humility, and a willingness to face the unknown. Mystics throughout history have taught that the deepest spiritual truths are often found not in moments of light and clarity, but in the dark, uncertain places where we are forced to confront the limits of our understanding and the depths of our being. To walk this path is to embrace the paradox of light and shadow. It is to recognize that these two forces, though seemingly opposite, are inextricably linked. The light reveals, but the shadow deepens. The light inspires, but the shadow humbles. Together, they guide us toward a more complete understanding of ourselves, the divine, and the world around us. In the end, the interplay of light and shadow in mysticism is not just a metaphor for spiritual growth. It is the very essence of the spiritual journey. It is the dance of creation and destruction, the ebb and flow of consciousness, the ongoing process of becoming that defines our existence. To embrace both light and shadow is to embrace the fullness of life itself, with all its beauty, mystery, and complexity. As we conclude this exploration, remember that the path of light and shadow is a personal one, yet it is also universal. It is the path that every seeker must walk at some point in their journey. Whether you are in a season of light, where everything seems clear and bright, or a season of shadow, where uncertainty and confusion reign, know that both are necessary and both are sacred. The mystics remind us that in the deepest darkness, the light shines brightest. And in the brilliance of light, the shadow offers depth, contrast, and wisdom. The journey is not to escape one in favor of the other but to find the harmony between them, to walk the path of balance with an open heart and a clear mind. This is the essence of the mystical journey, the endless dance between light and shadow, where the soul is continually refined and transformed, guided by the eternal interplay of these two profound forces. In conclusion, the interplay of light and shadow in mysticism is a profound metaphor for the spiritual journey. Across various traditions, light represents clarity, truth, and divine wisdom, while shadow embodies the unknown, the hidden, and the necessary challenges of growth. Mystics understand that both forces are essential for transformation, revealing that true enlightenment comes not from escaping darkness, but from embracing it as a vital part of spiritual development. The dance between light and shadow is not a battle, but a harmonious balance, guiding us toward deeper self-awareness, unity with the divine, and a more profound understanding of the cosmos.